Regents of the University of California versus Bakke, 1978. Although the civil rights movement of the 1960s brought a lot of much-needed change to American society, improving the lives of many African Americans and other minority groups, there were some that it affected negatively. Allen Bakke was one of these individuals. In 1974, Bakke sued the University of California, Davis, after applying and not being accepted into their medical school, while other, less qualified minority students had been admitted. Bakke, originally from Minneapolis, had graduated from the University of Minnesota with a degree in engineering. To help pay for his educational costs, Bakke had enlisted in ROTC and, upon graduation, spent 4 years as a Marine fulfilling his obligations. This included a tour in Vietnam. Experiencing war in Vietnam caused Bakke's interest to begin to shift from engineering to medicine. Upon returning to the United States, Bakke obtained a master's degree from Stanford and became an engineer at the NASA Ames Research Center, south of San Francisco. While working for NASA, Bakke designed experiments to be used on animals, testing the effects of weightlessness and radiation on their bodies. These experiments caused Bakke's interest in medicine to continue to grow. In 1972, Bakke applied to 11 medical schools across the country, including, as his first choice, the University of California, Davis. Although Bakke had high test scores, testing above the 90th percentile on 3 of the 4 MCAT test categories, Bakke was rejected by all 11 schools. At the time, the University of California, Davis had 2 separate applications for those entering the medical school, one for Caucasians and one for minorities. In 1970, the university had started a minority recruitment program, which reserved 16 of the 100 spaces open for new medical students for minorities. Although Bakke's scores were lower than the average of the Caucasian pool of applicants, they were still significantly higher than those of some of the minority students accepted to the university. The applications between the 2 pools of potential students were not compared. After applying to the University of California, Davis and being rejected again in 1974, Bakke sued the university for discrimination. Bakke's case went all the way to the Supreme Court. The principle in question was whether the University of California had violated the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause and the Civil Rights Act of 1964 by practicing an affirmative action policy that had repeatedly caused Bakke to be rejected entrance into his medical school. The Equal Protection Clause required that each state provide equal protection under the law to all individuals within its jurisdiction. This meant that, in terms of law enforcement, each individual was to be treated by the state just as any other individual would be treated in a similar situation and circumstance. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 further described how this amendment should be practiced in daily life. Under Title VI of the Act, no person in the United States was to be denied the benefits of a program or be subject to discrimination in it, based on race, color, national origin, or sex, if the program was receiving federal financial assistance. The court would later decide whether this act should also be meant to cover entrance into universities. In 1978, the Supreme Court, made up at the time by the Supreme Court Justices Burger, Stewart, Powell, Rehnquist, Stevens, Brennan, White, Marshall, and Blackmun, came to a split decision regarding the case. They determined that the university's system of admitting minority students was a quota system and that reserving spots only for minority students was unconstitutional. However, they determined that affirmative action itself was not unconstitutional, and that the university could continue to take race into consideration among its applicants to compensate for past discrimination and help diversify their student body. The Supreme Court also had to come to a decision regarding whether Bakke should be admitted into the University of California, Davis. It was decided that, since it could not be proven that he would not have been admitted if the affirmative action policy had not been in place, that he should be admitted. Bakke began classes in the fall of 1978, graduated in 1982, and upon graduation received an internship at Mayo Clinic in Minnesota.